What's going on, everyone? Today we have the meta snapshot for patch 12.23b. There was a B patch. We did a quick rundown of it if you want to catch up on that. But there were, I believe, 55 changes that they made. And this patch is going to be for the next month, so we better buckle down and actually really learn what's going to be happening this month. Also, we will be updating this every week, so as things change, as the meta develops, every Friday we'll be updating the meta snapshot. So in the S tier, we have Yummi as the strongest comp right now, followed by Kaisa. After that, we have Soraka, Samira, Spellslinger Taliyah, Anima Misfortune, Hacker Zed, Force Viego, and Jax. You may notice there are a ton of S tier comps right now, and the reason why it's going to be more crowded, similar to last set, augments really unlock specific team comps. So whether a comp is S tier in a specific game or A tier is really going to depend on their augments. So all of these forecast units that you see here are all pretty decently viable right now. So it's a bit of a free-for-all. In the A tier, we have threats. There are a lot of cool Vel'Koz comps out there. There's some Bel'Veth Asol comps. Star Guardian's pretty good. Talon, Gangplank, Ashe, Zoe, Camille, and Duelist. And after we go through this whole list, we'll get into how to play every single one of those compositions, how to play the early game, what items to put on people, why they're in a certain place on the tier list. And then in the B tier, we have Wukong Reroll, Lulu, Vayne, Kayle, Nasus, Super Draven, and Anima Jinx. We'll be adding more team comps as the weeks go on, so if your team isn't listed here, hopefully they should be in there soon, but these are the comps that are going to be great in this current patch. Also, we are going to be giving away 200 little legend eggs. So if you guys want free eggs, I'll be leaving an egg hunt on my website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta. Every 24 hours for the next 20 days, I will hide a code somewhere in the meta snapshot. So if you want those codes, you're gonna have to check often and try to find it in the site. And I'll make it a little bit hard to find. Maybe in the beginning it'll be easier, and then as it goes on, I'll see how quickly they get claimed and then make it harder after that. But these codes work regardless of what region you're in, so anyone can win it, which is, I think, really cool. So going on into the comps, we're starting off with Yummi Reroll. This is S+ right now, and this is the only Yummi comp right now. It's a comp that everyone's going to be complaining about in a few days. If you haven't heard complaints about it yet, just wait and see. That's all I'm going to say. But the main part of the comp is just to go for Yummi 3-star and Super 3-stars, and that just makes her super, super strong. And she will be one-tapping people, and you move her up a little bit because sometimes her range is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She can hit people in the back line potentially. And that's where a lot of her power comes from. You want to make sure that she one-taps those people, and the way to play this comp, you want to roll at level 5 above 50 gold for Galio 3-star and Nasus 3-star and Gangplank 3-star if you can. So if you have a lot of copy of those units, let's say you have 4 of each at stage 3-1 for all 3 of those, slow roll for them at level 5 and get at least Galio 3. If you don't have that, you could go level 6 and just roll for Yummi. But obviously pick up other supers and Yummis on your way rolling down at that point. After you hit all your 3-star units, or as many as you can, you level up for other units such as Alistar and Sejuani. The least important 3-star unit in this composition is Gangplank, so he's one of those optional people. So if you ever need to make room on your bench, just sell the extra Gangplanks. Items for Yummi is just blue buff and AP items. Blue buff is essentially just necessary, no replacements for that. After that, tank items will be situational based on what your opponents are playing. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to the Yummi comp. You just play her. Here's some augment recommendations. And obviously, Predatory Precision is really good for Yummi carry, but Zoomies is also good. Galio augments are good. Malphite also is good too. So just some options for you there. Next, let's go into Kaisa Recon. So Kaisa got buffed a little bit because Recons got changed. I believe at 3 and 4 Recon, they increased the critical strike bonus by 30 and 25%. So it's pretty sizable because I think that's like double the increase that they had before. So you get a ton of crit on Kaisa, so Jeweled Gauntlet just makes her pretty much do a lot of crit damage, and then you just pair on other damage items on her and Vayne and tank with Nyla, and that's going to be pretty much all you have to do. The great part about this comp is that you share 3 units that are really important, Nyla, Kaisa, and Vayne, and they're all 3-cost units and they all share synergy. So you could just do a slow roll at level 7 for all 3 of those because you're playing 3-cost reroll, and you just get them to 3-star and they typically dominate the game pretty hard. Some of the things you should consider though is the early game. So Gadgetines are pretty good, Recon Defenders is decent, and then you slowly go into your Kaisa comp during stage 3 or latest stage 4. Here are some other items you could consider on Kaisa. Vayne just likes any items. You want to prioritize Kaisa items, so Vayne just like slam whatever AD item leftovers that you have, and then tank items. Again, it's going to depend on the enemy teams, but just focus on Nyla. I'd say Warmogs is the most important one because she's one of those few tanks that doesn't really have that great of tank synergy, so just getting the extra health really helps her out a lot. We have some augments here. Obviously, Triforce is like S+ tier in this build because you're mainly just running 3 costs, but we have some other options here as well if you want to take a look. On to the next build, we have Soraka Carry. So Soraka right now is S tier because it's easy to transition into, and it caps out pretty high depending on what the admin trait is. Obviously, if you get one very favorable for Soraka, it's one of the green lights to go for this comp. Like most AP builds, you want to play something like Gadgettine to start off the game, and maybe use like Lulu, Lux, Ezreal, or Yummi as your item holders. You could even play something like Recon Ezreal as your mid-game carry before you get the Soraka 2, because all the Soraka items work really well on each of these item holders down here. As for the rest of the team, we have Sejuani and Zac as kind of the 2 main tanks. We have Fiddle as late game insurance policy, and then we just played 2 hearts, Sona and Soraka, and then admins with LeBlanc, Camille, and Blitzcrank. You don't have to go for admin if it's not that great of a bonus, but if it is, obviously put it in. For items, I really like blue buff on Soraka, and then after that, any AP item will do. On to the next build, we have Samira. So Samira, she didn't really get touched too much, but since a lot of other comps got nerfed a bit, Samira should be a force to at least be kind of reckoned with in this current patch. And you pretty much just need to build a lot of frontline with her. So in my 100 tips and tricks video that I just released, I talked about how sure shots, they are kind of like a built-in Archangel staff. So you really want to focus a lot on tanks. And as you guys can see here, we have 2 sure shots in the back and then 6 tanky units in the front. That's how important tanking is with sure shots, because you get the built-in scaling throughout the fight. So you just need your team to live for Samira and or Aphelios to clean everyone up at the end. By the way, since Aphelios is kind of like a secondary carry until he gets to 2-star, probably the stun ability is going to be the best on him. For attack damage item holders, we have Ashe, Kayle, Sivir, and Senna. And then this comp obviously only comes online at around level 8, so you want to do what's called a fast 8. Play strongest board, go up to 4-5, and then wait until stage 4-5, and then level up to level 8, roll down for your 4-cost units such as Samira, Echo, Sejuani, and Zac, and really just build your team after that. Of course, in a lot of games, your HP might not be that high, so if you will need to roll on level 7, you could go for this comp still, but you could also play other stuff instead before pivoting to this comp at maybe stage 5-1, for example. Another thing to keep in mind is that the front line can literally be anything tanky. So you see here we have like some Brawlers, some Mascot, some Aegis, but let's say you hit some of the legendary tanks, you could put them in. Let's say there's a lot of magic damage, you could play like 4 Aegis if you want. Let's say there's like no magic damage, you could play Set with like some Defender. There are a lot of different things you could swap in and out. You could even play like Rammus and Cho'Gath if those are relevant threats to your team. For Samira, we have some item recommendations down here. Since she mainly does physical damage, like Last Whisper is pretty needed. Having 1 healing item is pretty nice if you're facing some Zeds. It really depends if you're facing Zed or not. And then after that, just like pure damage items, and then you're pretty much set from there. Onto the next build, we have the Taliyah Carry. So Taliyah is very popular right now. Even towards the end of the last patch, she spiked up a little bit. And the way to build her is you don't really need mana items, so you really don't need any tiers for her. So you don't really need blue buff or Spear of Shojin for her. The best builds I found are just pure damage, and even an item like Shield Breaker is really, really, really good on her. And I think it's like one of the cooler items because she does her AoE ability. She's probably going to hit some sort of shield unit, and then her wall does the pop, and then that's where the big damage comes in with Shield Breaker. So it's a nice little tech that you could put in on Taliyah. We definitely have it down in the item section down here. And yeah, the way to play this comp, again, you're going for 4-cost carry, so ideally you roll an 8. We also have a bunch of legendaries here, but you don't have to run these legendaries. The ones we have now are Janna, Fiddlesticks, and Syndra. Those are kind of optional, you know, because obviously you can't guarantee getting a 5-cost, so you could flex other things in here. You could play more Star Guardians before you reach there. You could play more Spellslingers before you reach there. You can even play like maybe a bunch of Hearts before you reach there too, or more frontline. But the best way to play this composition is to do a fast 8 like we were talking about in the Samira comp, and then instead of rolling for the Samira units, you roll for the units you see here. Different item holders because you're going for AP obviously, so more so in line with the Kaisa build and Soraka build that we were seeing a bit earlier. More item recommendations down here if you guys want to get more detail. All of this will be on my website at bunnymuffins.lol/meta. And then onto the next build, Misfortune Anima Squad. So Misfortune is probably one of my favorite units, just because she kind of cleans up everyone, and it's like the bunny synergy, so we got that going too. And since everything else got nerfed, MF got like a okay buff. She is going to be slightly stronger because of all those reasons. Spear of Shojin, I think, is the most important item on her because you really just need her to cast often. Jeweled Gauntlet just adds a ton of damage because it allows her spell to crit, and then Archangels is good to clean up guys in the late game. But literally any AP damage item can do, and the only thing I'd say you'd really want to prioritize is the Spear of Shojin. AP item holders are going to be your choice again here because MF is AP, but you could add like a Jinx in there. I don't think we had Jinx listed in the other places, but the reason why Jinx is good here is because she's also an Anima squad, so you could get those Anima squad stacks going with the Jinx instead. She's also pretty flexible because you don't even need to play Anima squad with her. It doesn't give that much AP or AD when you look at the trait. So you either need frontline or like a complementary damage. Something that could work is maybe like running Aurelion Soul as a secondary carry to try to weaken people for MF to finish off. You could do a bunch of random legendaries like Nunu and Fiddlesticks, or just kind of run more tanks and just see what goes on there. We have a bunch of other items down here as per usual, some augment recommendations, but let's move on into the Hacker Zed comp. This was probably the best comp of last patch, and we had it in S tier before, but obviously things have changed. Most important item on Zed is going to be the Edge of Night. I'd say that's the only mandatory item on him. The rest kind of don't matter. It depends on what items you're getting. It depends on what teams you're facing, how long the fights are lasting. But this comp is really good because it's really flexible, because you really just need 3 Hacker, Zed, LeBlanc, and Zoe, and then the rest of your team could be anything. So you could handpick perfect counters to your enemy teams. You could just use what you're hitting and save up econ, go level 9. That's where I think most of the power is in this comp. Most people like using Zoe as a secondary carry. She's also great at keeping you alive in the early to mid game. So this comp, it's like maybe a top 4-ish comp right now, but it's still pretty good. You still can get first place with it if you do a lot of positioning. Oh yeah, that's another thing. With this comp, you need to position a lot because you're playing Zed as a hacker, and he's jumping to the backline with the Hackerim, right? So you need to scout and find out where people's carries are and move him right before the round starts to the relevant side. So there will be swords on the right-hand side of your screen, and that dictates who you will face in the next round. So scout whether people are on the left or the right side and then move your Zed accordingly. That's probably the most important thing to do with this comp. Obviously for augments, like Knife's Edge is absolutely insane because Zed likes attack damage. Thrill the Hunt's good. Sometimes there's too much healing. Notice we don't build any healing items on him. You just go pure damage. Like all the items are here. Implants is good for more AD. Radiant Relic, since you really only care about Zed, it's a really good choice as well. Onto the next build, we have Force Viego. So Viego got a ton of nerfs. He's probably like the most heavily nerfed comp of the recent patch, which is a little unfortunate because I think he's really fun to play. Luckily, I think he's still alive. He's a little tricky because the Renegade units, there really are only so many of them you could play, and it's really hard to reach 6. And he had a big cap at getting 6 if you got like a Renegade emblem. There's also like the 8 Force build that people were doing that was really good, but they nerfed him a bit to kind of put him more under control. Another thing about Viego though is that he's really flexible because you really just need 3 Renegade and then you can play almost anything else after that. While having a lot of Force is nice, it's not like completely mandatory. At the end of the day, the most important thing for him is obviously hitting him 2-star and getting the proper items on him. So I still think Ionic Spark is the best on him, but you could almost use any usable damage item. So Jeweled Gauntlet is a crowd favorite because crit on a reset champion is just incredibly good. A lot of people like Archangel Staff instead of Jeweled Gauntlet, which is fine too because the Renegade buff, it accentuates the damage once all your Renegades die. So when he's the last man standing, you get a lot more stacks, and then since you have more AP stacks from the Archangels, the Renegade buff is going to hit even harder. Both lines of thoughts are good. One's more early game focus, one's more late game focus in the fights. So it really depends on what types of teams you're facing or what type of other items you have to complement the early fight bursts or the prolonged fights. But onto the next build, we have Jax. So Jax got hit by the nerf hammer a little bit hard. Is it enough to take him out? I actually don't think so. I think he's still in there because there were a bunch of different builds that he was being used in. There was like the pure Brawler comp. There was the Mecha Prime and Brawler comp. So there are kind of 2 versions of him. People were playing around with different items on him. People were doing like RFC builds. There's a classic like Rageblade BT Quicksilver build. A lot of different things you could do. Another thing that's underrated about Jax is you could just use him as an item holder and play other stuff later, so you don't have to rely on hitting Jax 3. And sometimes nerfing a reroll comp actually buffs it because less people go for it. A lot of times in the last patch, so many people were contesting Jax that they were all griefing each other. So one person would win because he'd hit Jax 3, and then the other 2 people would lose because they were hard stuck on Jax 2. But maybe that doesn't happen anymore because he got nerfed, so less people go for him. The 2 builds that we've seen is the Gwynsu's build with Quicksilver and Bloodthirster, and then the other one is the range build, which has RFC, Jeweled Gauntlet, and Rageblade. 2 different ways to play the same game. You kind of just have one survivability item. Both share the Rageblade, and then like one favors the healing, one favors the spell crit. Again, both of them work. It just depends what items you get in that game. One thing to note, some people have been asking me, like, if you have RFC Jax, you want him second row or third row? And I've heard from some high-level players that third row is a little safer than second row when you have the RFC, but it doesn't make, like, that much of a difference. So if you don't like wasting his time by walking up a square, you could leave him on the second row. But I have seen and heard other players say that you want him in the third row if you have RFC. Just like a small little tip there. But onto the A tier. A tier just means it's like a little bit weaker than the S tiers. It doesn't mean they're bad or anything. It's just like a secondary option, especially since a lot of these are reroll comps. You just can't play them as often, but they're still equally strong or even stronger if you get the right conditions for them. So threats, they do either Bel'Veth, Aurelion Sol, or Vel'Koz carry. The version we have here is the Bel'Veth and Aurelion Sol version. And because Aurelion Sol got buffed, I'm actually really excited to play this composition. He pretty much has a built-in Morellonomicon, so it's just really useful to save an extra item on your carry because you could just go full damage or include like a healing item like we do here. Obviously, if you get threat level maximum, you play as many threats as you can, but you don't have to play every threat unit. Just because it's a threat comp doesn't mean you can't play other synergies. If you just want to focus on Aurelion Sol carry and then you don't get a Bel'Veth, maybe you get a Zed instead, you could just play Zed with Hacker and then just do random frontline. It could be the threat frontline that we see here, or it could be like an Aegis frontline or a Defender frontline or even a Brawler frontline. Lots of different things you could do here. This is definitely like a flex comp, this set. So just keep that in mind whenever you're playing this. You don't have to copy the image here. In fact, that goes for every image because sometimes you get certain augments that are different. Sometimes you're just not hitting a certain champion. So you just use these as kind of general guidelines. And if you can play the comp you see on your screen, like great. If not, like don't worry too much about it because there's always different things you could put in each of your games. Next build up we have is Vertical Star Guardian. This is the 7 Star Guardian build with Taliyah, and this just accelerates her mana regen. You also get to play Kaisa to kind of static shiv everyone down, and then Echo's going to be the main tank, obviously, because he's pretty much the only viable Star Guardian tank. Like, Rel is tanky too, but you need her 3-star to really become alive, but 2-star Echo is good enough in most cases, and then Alistar matches up perfectly because he gives you both Mascot and Aegis for Yummi and Echo. I'd say the other Taliyah version is slightly stronger, but sometimes you're not able to play that. The great thing about the Vertical Star Guardian comp is that it's a lot cheaper. Notice how we have 2 2-cost units and 1 1-cost unit and 2 3-cost units. The other build for Taliyah we had, I believe, had like a ton more. Yeah, we had like 3 legendaries in it, only 1 2-cost unit. So it's a bit of a different take, as you can see already. The advantage of this is that you could hit this comp earlier, you could roll on 7 and maybe stabilize with a Kaisa 2 really early. Maybe you could use this comp to econ into a fast 9 and then get all the legendaries later on much easier. A lot of different advantages when you have a cheaper team comp. Same item holders as before, but yeah, the crux of the comp is just play a lot of Star Guardians. We have the Kaisa and Taliyah item recommendations down here too, when you want to check that out, as well as some augment recommendations as well. On to the next build, we have Talon Reroll. So we're starting to get into some of the more like fun build for some people. Some people don't like Reroll though. But Talon's very, very solid. But you want the Talon Carry augment before you play this because it's not really that great without it. I mean, it's playable, but you definitely need Viego to complement it if you don't have the carry augment. The tricky part about this whole hero augment situation is that sometimes a unit's not going to be that great without the augment, and you can't use it as a solo carry. Doesn't mean it can't be like a secondary carry. Like if you're hitting Talons for free and you don't have the hero augment, you could still use that in your mid game and then still play, add on a Viego later on, or maybe an Aphelios. but you always have to think of different ways to react in your game. To play this, it's a pretty simple comp. I'll do this reroll pattern just in case people are kind of new, and since we haven't gone over a reroll comp yet, but when you play him, you could do what's called a hyper roll first, and this is the round after Krugs. This is stage 3-1. You could roll all the way down to 0 until you get a 3-star Talon. And I typically do this if I have around 6 Talons at that point, which is pretty rare. If not, I do what's called a slow roll. I just stay above 50 gold, level up to level 5, and then roll down to 50 gold every single turn until I hit a Talon 2. Two different ways to approach it. Maybe I'll do a video later on comparing hyper rolling and slow rolling. Next build up we have is Gangplank Supers. This is just Gangplank Carry, and you need good Gangplank items and maybe even like an augment for him as well, because it's pretty situational. A lot of the A and B tiers are situational in this set, but you just complement him with Malphite and Lee Sin tanking, and then as many 3-stars as possible. We have a lot of 2-cost units here: Lee Sin, Malphite, Vi, and Fiora. So obviously with supers, you want as many 2-stars as possible. So after you hit the Gangplank 2 by typically slow rolling at level 5, you want to level up to 6 and get the 3-star supers if you can. It's a bit of a risky comp to do because if you don't get the 3-stars, you're pretty screwed, but that's part of the risk reward of these types of comps. Onto that next build, we have Ashe Reroll, very similar theme to the Talon Reroll. This comp got nerfed a lot. It's probably still playable, so we're keeping it in the A tier right now, but it's more reliant on hitting your team a bit earlier. So same thing, same reroll pattern as before. Onto the next build, we have Zoe Reroll. Zoe Reroll is a bit interesting because they nerfed Zoe a bit, which might be good. And also a lot less people are playing Zed, so maybe you're able to get Zoe 3-star easier this patch. So when Zoe's less contested, hopefully we'll be able to 3-star her more often and then kind of be able to go from there. There are also a couple of different versions of this build. I saw someone do a Zoe 3 with threats, and that worked out pretty well too, because a lot of them are 3-cost, so you just re-roll for them at the same level. You go for like Zoe, Rammus, and Cho'Gath. There's someone else too, I forget who it is. And you just play like full 7 tanks with Zoe and try to delay as much as you can for the Morello. But normally how I do this, I just do the Gadgettine start and then pivot into Zoe as soon as I can, just with the Morello and ideally a blue buff, because it just makes her proc a lot faster. Both augments for Zoe are good, and that's a little bit rare because sometimes like the carry augment is obviously really good for carrying, support augment obviously really good for supporting, but both of them can help her carry because Sleepy Time just delays the fight a lot and allows her to just cast her spell a bunch of times before the 3 people she stuns wakes up. Onto the next build, we have Camille Reroll. Camille is very good if you get the Camille augment, and they actually like nerfed that augment, so it's not going to be as strong, but it's still probably pretty good, you know? Like even without the augment, the Camille reroll build is playable. It's just not as good as the other comps we saw before. I'm sorry to bring this up, but because we have so many comps in the S tier, the A tier definitely is a little less powerful right now, and whether that's a blessing or a curse, we'll find out in a little bit. But to play a Camille reroll, you do the same reroll strategies as we talked about before with the Ashe, with the Renekton, with the supers, but you do it at level 6 instead of level 5 because Camille's a 2-cost unit. Not too much other details there. You just roll for the comp and then play the units you see here and go from there. On to the next build, we have Yasuo and Fiora reroll. This is the Duelist reroll comp, and generally to play this, you want the Yasuo augment. And Yasuo, he pops teams a lot, and it's really cool. But if you don't get that, it's pretty hard to play. But a lot of times in this game right now, if you see an augment early on, you can just click it and play it right away and kind of force it from there. Sometimes you get unlucky and you don't hit the 3-star, but that's just part of TFT. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. As long as your average placements are good, you'll be able to climb. To play this comp, it's very similar to the Camille comp. It's just the 2-cost reroll pattern at level 6. For the B tier, we're going to do a bit of a speed run because there are some, like, I think that we have like 26 comps total, and we have around like 8 in the S tier, 10 in the A tier or something like that. I didn't actually do the counting, I'm just approximating. So If you're trying to go for a B tier comp, it really only means you're going for it because you have their hero augment. So that means you're probably not going to be playing them that often because sometimes the hero augments just don't even pop up. I'll go over like what type of reroll patterns you'll need to do for all the B tiers along with like who the primary carries are. So first one is Wukong reroll. So you just want to do a 1-cost reroll pattern. So either hyper roll at level 4 or slow roll at level 5. Lulu, same thing, except you're playing AP items. We'd also like have the item recommendations still for all these units, so definitely check that out on the website there. For Vayne is super fun. She actually might sneak into the A- tier maybe, or maybe she's just good to complement Kaisa with. But this is a 3-cost reroll, so we'd want to do this at level 7. You pretty much hit level 7 around stage 3-5 or 4-1, and then you just roll down to 50 gold every single time and then find a time to all in to find your Vayne 3. Maybe if you have around like 6 Vaynes or if you have less than 30 health, you might want to start all inning. Kayle rerolls next. She is a 1-cost reroll, so you do that at level 4 or 5. Nasus, mascot, level 4 or 5 as well. You need the Nasus augment, and like RFC is very important for him too. Draven reroll. This is a super Draven comp. You know, I really think Draven, later on, people are going to start frontlining him, similar to how people did with Dragonmancer Karma. I just have to see when it'll happen. You know, I don't want to put it up there when no one's really figured out the best build for him yet, but I think he should be good up there. But to do this, you just do level 6 reroll and then go for the supers as well because they're also 2-cost units. Pretty much for 2-cost unit rerolls, like supers are going to be pretty good if they have some sort of way to give them at least like a little bit of synergy. In this case, we don't have that much, but we do get Brawler still, which is, I guess, enough, you know? Onto the next build, we have Jinx. Little bit of a troll build, in my opinion, because Jinx, I just don't think she's that great of a carry because she is a CC unit after all. So it's going to be hard to make her work. But if you want to try, 5 Anima squad is possible. It probably revolves a lot more on the Riven being tanky and kind of like stalling the fight out for your team. But that's going to be all the comps. For the item priorities, we have them listed out down here. Right now, Rod and Tier are best because AP is probably going to be the bread and butter for at least the first week. Keep in mind, the meta changes, so that's why we update this every single week. For example, in the last patch, on the first day of the patch, everyone was playing Taliyah, everyone was playing AP, everyone was like, oh, all AD comps suck except for Zed. Zed's the only one that's viable. And then Jax came around, and then all the AP comps started sucking. So metas change over time, and you always have to be adapting, so that's why we update it every week. So hopefully you guys subscribe below for updates on that. But Rod and Tier are great because of all the AP comps. Belt just generally very good for flexing into stuff. Bow probably really good for Zed and Jax. Same with Sword. And then like we have the leftover defensive utility items at the end over here. But again, just to summarize up here, lots of S tier comps. They're mainly the 4-cost rerolls. In the A tier, we have a bunch of rerolls plus some of like the weird comps like threats. B tier mainly just low cost reroll that you probably don't want to play that often. But don't forget about the egg giveaway. Check the website often and like first come first serve, you know? Early bird gets the picking as per usual with things in life. But let me know what types of comps you are looking forward to run this patch. Let me know what rank you are. Let me know what rank you're trying to get to. And apart from that, we will see you all later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And of course, smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.